We've looked at some of the voting rights and the legislation involving voting rights, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and some court cases and some summary judgments that involve voting rights and segregation. And so now Mr. Fort is coming to talk to you about his experiences, and hopefully that'll help to make things solid for you, but also to understand a little bit more of our culture in Tampa.
First thing, good morning. How are you?
Good.
I'm fortunate to be alive today, and the reason I say that, there's only 2 civil rights persons that are still alive in the Tampa area that participated in the integration of the lunch counters of schools in Tampa. One other gentleman, he's 80 years old, and I'm 77. Thank you very much. You look pretty good, huh? All right. Well, anyway, today is actually leap year, February 20th, 1960, and that was the day that we started 54 years ago, 59 years ago, 56 years ago, 1960. So I want to start out by playing Lift Every Voice and Sing. Have any of you ever heard of that song? Lift Every Voice and Sing. It's the Negro national anthem. It's the anthem that we took up in slavery, and they started singing that right after slavery. They made it our own national anthem. I know we have our regular national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, right? But that was for African Americans to remember our past when we came out of slavery. It was written by a young man out of Jacksonville, Florida. Anybody ever heard of James Weldon Johnson? He was a poet. He wrote poems and things. Actually, he was from Jacksonville, Florida. You guys might want to Google that or look that up when you get a chance. What I'm going to do, I'm going to play that. There's a lot of historical figures you'll see in this. As the words are coming up on the screen, it'll show captions of different people. Now, I want you to try and see if you could name some of them. See if you could remember some. It'll be people like Rosa Parks, Dr. Martin Luther King. All of those people are featured in this song, Lift Every Voice and Thing. In fact, it tells the history of African American history. This song really paints a picture better than I can tell you, this song. So you really need to pay close attention. I have a youth group at the church I attend. 2 Saturdays ago, I gave them a test on that. And the one that got the most right, of course, they got a pretty good prize. So we're not going to test you, okay? But we do really want you to get something out of this by looking at the song, and then I'll start from there. And what I want to do is try to explain some of these pictures so you'll know what they are. Tell you what each picture represents. There's a lot of history in these pictures, and just about all of the ones you see, that's myself. That's 20 years old right there on the corner of that big picture. So I was once young, okay? A lot of people think, oh, you just old. Yeah, well, we was once young, okay? And of course, the other pictures, I'll talk about them as we get into those. Okay, so if we can dim the lights a little bit and go ahead and play that, we'll get started. We'll go from there. What do you think? Did you recognize anyone?
Yes.
Who did you recognize? Jackie Robinson. Who was Jackie Robinson? Yes, first African American Negro baseball player in the major leagues. Anybody ever see the story 42?
Yeah.
Great story, eh? Mr. Branch Rickey, he was the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers at the time, and he brought Jackie Robinson up as the first African American Negro baseball player in the major leagues. Now, who else did you see? There was quite a few. I know you saw President Barack Obama, right? He was the last. There was one man in there you guys really should know about. Yes?
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King. Right. All right. Anyone else? Oprah Winfrey. That's good. Good observation. Anyone else? Dr. King's wife, Coretta Scott King. She was near the end. Absolutely. Anyone else? Now, there was one gentleman there that you guys had really affected going to school. Thurgood Marshall. Anyone know who Thurgood Marshall was? Thurgood Marshall was the gentleman that led the fight for school integration. In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education. He was the lead attorney, Thurgood Marshall. And guess what? He later became the first what? What was that? First, right, Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall. We've had two African Americans. Thurgood Marshall was the first one, and of course Clarence Thomas is the second one that we have had as Supreme Court Justice. But Thurgood Marshall led the fight against Brown versus the Board of Education that integrated the schools, that allowed the mixture of classes, that allowed African Americans and white students to go to the same school. Don't forget that. Now, if you look at this picture right here, this small picture, well, you're still sitting at the counter. That's me, the second one. Okay. Now, at the bottom is a young man. He's the first African American student to integrate Hillsborough County school system. His name is Robert Saunders. That's McFarland Park Elementary School, right here. First African American to integrate the Hillsborough County schools after Brown versus the Board of Education. So now it didn't just happen in 1954. It took a while before he was able to get into the school. Just like right now, and I'm sure your teachers are aware of it, I think it's this year or next year in Hillsborough County they're going to start teaching African American history in classes. Is that right? Now some of the counties are already started, like Dade County, Broward County down in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. But if I'm not mistaken, they're going to start teaching it either this year or next year. But they passed out a few years ago, Florida, that they will be teaching in Hillsborough County School.
They just gave us all the materials for 8th grade
Right.
history, but 7th grade, we've already been doing a lot of it, the court cases that he was talking about.
Right.
And Thurgood Marshall, that's next week and the week after that, we're going to be learning about those court cases. We haven't gotten there quite yet, but that's next
Right.
week.
That's great. You'll learn a lot about that. Now, let me tell you a little bit of something about this picture here. This picture is the one that I was most involved in. All right? This is the actual sit-in demonstration that took place February 1st, 1960. That's me sitting there. I was the first one to take a seat. Now, how did this happen? Well, the reason it happened, I was the president of the NAACP, which is National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. I was the youth council president. I came to Tampa in 1958 out of Talababa College in Tyler, Texas. I went to school out in Tyler, Texas, Talababa College, so I was a young boy, right? Actually 19 years old at the time, okay? So, when they had the first sit-in demonstrations in Greensboro, North Carolina, 4 students from North Carolina A&T, they had their sit-ins 2 weeks prior to us having the ones here. So once they had it up there, I went to the branch, the leadership, and told them I wanted to do it here. They said, absolutely not. I don't know if you know the history of the NAACP, but that's a good study project. Go back, Google it, and look it up. But at that time, they do not participate in any demonstration. They are not a part of it. However, if you got into trouble doing that, they would come to your rescue. They would help bail you out. They would give attorneys for you to help get you out of trouble. But they didn't start anything. So they told me I could not do it. What do you think I did? I did it what? Like some of you guys do at home, do it anyway when your parents tell you not. Okay, anyway, I turned in my membership. I said, if I cannot do it at a member of the NAACP, I will get out of the organization. So I got out of the organization. I went out to the local high schools. There were 2 at the time. They are still here today, but they were segregated schools. Middleton High School and Howard W. Blake. Y'all ever heard of those schools? You probably will here because as you progress, you might end up going to one of them, right?
I told you guys I used to work at what used to be Blake High School.
Blake High,
Stewart Middle High
right.
now.
That's right. So I went out and I talked with the president of Middleton Student Council, student government. His name was George Edgecombe. You guys ever heard of George Edgecombe?
No.
Well, take him downtown. The courthouse downtown is named after him. He's the first African American judge in Hillsborough County. First African American judge in Hillsborough County. And he was the president of Middleton High School student government. He was a senior. So I said, listen, George, I need you to recruit some people for me. I need some students. He said, okay, we'll see what we can do. So he recruited about 16 students. And then I went over to Howard W. Blake, which was Blake at the time. They just called it Blake. And I told Shafter Scott, he was the president of the student council at Blake. And he recruited 20 students for me. So we met at a church downtown called St. Paul AME Church. We didn't tell them what they were going to be doing. We just told them to meet us down at the church. And when we went down to the church, we put little signs on them like this, I am an American. That's what it read. So we marched downtown and took a seat at F.W. Woodworth. Now if you look at this big picture here, that's F.W. Woodworth. And this is also F.W. Woodworth. This was taken last year. I was featured in the Florida Trend magazine. So that's that picture that was in the magazine. Well, that's the store. I was standing in front of that store when they took the picture. At the time, you could go into the store and spend $500 in the store. But if you wanted to eat a hamburger or a Coke, you had to buy it at the counter and take it outside. Kind of cruel, huh? You guys wouldn't have done that, would you? Yes, you would. That was the time when you didn't have any choice then. My own kids tell me, you guys are crazy. You mean you guys, white water fountain, colored water fountain, you wouldn't drink out of the white? That was the law of the land. So they say, well, I sure would have. Well, that was different at the time. Changed, of course. But yeah, that was the law of the land, and you just didn't do that type of thing. But those sit-in demonstrations on February 1st, 1960 changed all of that. Let me tell you how we changed it. Easter was going to be in 5 weeks from the day we had to sit in, from the time. So at that time, all African Americans bought all of their clothing, all of their little pretty Easter dresses and little Easter suits from, guess what? 5 and 10 cent stores, Woodworth. So I sent a letter to the press, told them we were going to boycott the stores if they didn't integrate the lunch package. Now, the city fathers didn't want that because they was going to lose a lot of money. So the mayor of Tampa, which was a very liberal mayor, I'll talk about that, he got some people together. He went and recruited 6 blacks, 6 African American leaders, and 6 white leaders. These guys owned stores and they owned businesses, and one of them was the president of the First National Bank downtown. They got together and they called me in. They said, listen, if you will stop demonstrating, we demonstrated for about 2 weeks, we promise you we will integrate, just give us some time. Well, guess what? They didn't want to lose that money at Easter time, right? I said, well, it's fine with me, but I don't know about the kids. I said, but I'll go back and see. So we decided to call it off, give them a chance to work it out. In the meantime, there was a strike with Heartline. The reason I'm saying Heartline, y'all know what Heartline is? That's the what? Bus company? Well, at the time it was called Tampa Transit Lines. They was on a strike. So they had no African American drivers. 80% of the riders was, guess what? African Americans. But they had no African American bus drivers. Right? So being the person, see, I am, still am. Okay. I wrote them a letter and I said, listen, when you guys come back off the strike, if you don't hire any African American drivers, we're going to boycott the buses. Now, y'all heard about the bus boycott in Montgomery, right? Well, I did the same thing in Tampa. I said, if you don't do that, if you don't hire them, we're going to boycott the buses. They sent me a letter back and say, find 4 truck drivers, send them to us, and we will see what we can do. So within 1 month after sending that letter, they hired the first 2 African American bus drivers. That's how we got Tampa Transit and now Heartline integrated. Today, 75% of the drivers for Heartline are African American, male and female. Okay? So guess what? Those sit-in demonstration was the springboard to everything that happened in Tampa. Everything. We integrated the beaches. There was a time when African Americans couldn't go to Ben T. Davis Beach. Y'all knew that? Couldn't go to the beach. We had a little beach out at the end of the beach, but we staged wade-ins. In other words, we would walk in the water, pull our shoes off, walk in the water. We did that. We finally integrated that. The theaters, we all had our separate theaters. We couldn't go to the theater. So we went to the Tampa Theater down on Franklin Street. About 25 of us got in line. As we got to the head of the line, the ticket agent had to tell each one of us, because of the state's policy of segregation, I cannot sell you a ticket. After about the 10th one, she got up and left. She quit. She told the manager, you sell it. So we did that for about 2 weeks, and pretty soon they integrated the theaters. So that's how we got everything started. Now, I have some pictures up here I want you to see to show you the difference in Tampa and other cities like Jacksonville and St. Augustine and Tallahassee. You see the police department standing here? After our second day, the mayor found out that we were going down again, so he sent the police department to the church. They escorted us downtown, stopped traffic. Tallahassee, they sicked the dogs on the kids. A lot of kids from Florida A&M University was trying to do the same thing in Tallahassee. They called out the fire department. They put water hoses on them. So now do you see the difference in Tampa and Tallahassee? They did the same thing in St. Augustine. In Jacksonville, some of the white guys in the community went to Sears and Roebuck and bought axe handles. And they beat them back to the church with axe handles. The African American axe handles. They call that Axe Handle Saturday. About 2 years ago, I went up and I spoke to their group, the NAACP group. But that's the difference in Tampa. Now, what do you think happened? That was unpopular for a white person to do that at the time. If you did that, you would be ostracized. What I mean by that, it would be bad for you as far as elections. So since the mayor came out with that liberal stand, he lost the next election. They wouldn't vote him back as mayor. Now, and looking at your history, you'll probably find out a gentleman by the name of Leroy Collins. He was the governor of Florida. He came on Florida television, did something about like a national address. And he said it's not fair to take money from African Americans in one part of the store and not serve them in another part of the store. So he lost the next election. So they wouldn't vote him back in. So if you was a moderate, what we call a moderate, what we call a liberal at the time, if you were helping African Americans for their cause, they ostracized you, they would not re-elect you back to office. This picture here is some of the students from Middleton and Blake. Young ladies, look at the dresses they were wearing there. Below the knee. Yeah, we dressed differently back in the 60s. very, very different. And they all dressed nice. You saw no jeans. In fact, they didn't wear jeans to school back in 1960. You had to wear a dress. The only time you wore something was when you had PE, of course. Then you had PE shorts then. But back then, everybody wore dresses. All girls wore dresses. Even in school I attended, they all wore them. I didn't tell you where I was from. I'm from near Gainesville. Anybody ever heard of University of Florida? Or a rural community near there called Hawthorne. That's where I came from. At the bottom here, that's where someone from Tampa Tribune was interviewing me. That's the first day they were interviewing me. Wanted to know about me, what did I do, where I come from, why did I do it. So I had to tell them all of that. Now, this picture here, I was with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. I did 20 years with them. I was a community relations liaison. And while there, 27 years ago, I started the Dr. King Parade in Tampa. Anybody ever been to that or heard about Dr. King Parade? Well, I was the one who started it. I coordinated it for 17 years. When I stepped down, a young man with the city took over. And even though I had retired in 2001, the sheriff let me come back to the sheriff's office, gave me an office, and I still coordinated that parade for 5 years. I thought I'd turn that sound up. Yes, it is. But for 5 years, they gave me an office, a telephone, a computer, and I still coordinated for 5 years after I retired. That's the kind of rapport I had with the sheriff's office. Now, I don't know if you see the sheriff's scarf here. That's the sheriff's department official newspaper. Comes out once a month. I was the only African American ever to be featured on the front page. That's how much they thought of what I had done. That I had helped change Tampa and helped change the sheriff's office, because a lot of things dealing with school integration, a lot of problems they had in schools, when they had expulsions and things of that nature. I participated because the NAACP called me. They called me. They knew I was in the Civil Rights Movement. They knew I was a liaison for the sheriff's office. So whenever there was a problem with a deputy sheriff and school resource officer, they called me. I got with the NAACP and we ironed out the situation. You never read about stuff like that, because we kept it out of the press. But that's the part, one of the parts that I played in it. Tell me how much time I have. Don't let me over talk.
I'm trying to look at about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. Now, this last picture over here, I guess you say, well, why in the world would he bring that? That's called, anybody ever heard of Greyhound?
Yeah.
Bus company? Well, Greyhound bought Trailways out. They purchased Trailways. They merged. Well, at the time, back in 1967, they had no African American Trailways bus drivers. None. Zilch. A lot of passengers with no driver. So guess what you think happened then? I went there. They said, why in the world you want to drive a bus? You got it made, you're doing this. It wasn't that I wanted to drive the bus, it's that they didn't want me to drive. Hello? Now this is strange. I went by there 7 times before they gave me an application. Every time I went by there was an excuse. The manager's not in. He's on vacation. He's out sick. He's going to a funeral. Everything they could imagine, they refused to give me an application. So the 6th time I went by, they say, well, you look pretty short to be a driver. So guess what they did? They said, we're going to have to measure you just to see if you measure up. So guess what they did? Took my shoes off. I had to take my shoes off. I never could understand how you're going to drive a bus with no shoes. But still, they accounted for that in my height. So they said, well, I guess we'll give you a shot. So they said, but you don't have any training. So guess what I had to do? Tampa Transit Bus Company that I helped integrated in 1960, I had to go back to them. They hired me on. I drove for them 11 months. And then I went back to Trailways and I said, I got it. So that's when they gave me an application. I'm getting ready to get to the good part now. I'm trying to hurry up and close. But after they gave me an application, Took about 3 weeks. They finally called me and said, we need you to come to Miami for an interview. My interview, I had to take my wife with me because she had to be married. I had to be 25 and married at the time I was. My interview lasted 8 hours. Anybody ever heard of an 8-hour interview? Normally it's 30, and then you hope you got the job. You're 30 and you hope you got it. 8 hours. They interviewed my wife for 4 hours. Everything you can imagine. They even recorded my voice. They had to make sure my voice sounded right. Okay? They wanted to make sure I didn't sound too black. I said, what? So I said, oh yes, I can talk just like anybody else, sir. Just give me the opportunity and I'll be fine. That was hilarious. But I had to do that. But anyway, I went to training in Miami for 2 weeks. Myself and 4 other white drivers. And I was yelled from sun up, sundown. I didn't know if I would make it. But I was the first African American, I guess I didn't tell that part. First African American to drive bus for Trailways in Florida. So I was number 1. So I finally made it through school. And I pulled my first run to Tallahassee with my driver trainer. And when I walked into the driver's lounge, we have a driver's lounge in every transfer station like Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, Tallahassee, Albany, Georgia, Atlanta. So every one I rode into, when I walked in, all the white drivers got up and walked out. So now you can look at that 2 ways. You can be bitter, or you can say, look what just happened to me. I got the whole lounge. So I kicked my shoes off, got me a pillow, and stretched out on the sofa. So see, it's how you look at life that makes you a person. So, did I take it a bad way? Nope. Was I better? No. Because guess what? I expected that. I expected that. And it worked out. Now, if I had failed, I don't know how long it would have been. But 2 months after I had been there, they hired another driver. 2 months later, 2 more. And at 14 years, I had worked my way up to assistant safety director. And guess who was in charge of all the drivers there? Me. I trained 121 Trailways drivers. Out of the 121, I had 1 that failed. And he wanted to go back home to his family. I refused to let him fail because I knew what I had gone through. So when the other drivers was out, trainers, after 4 o'clock, I went back to the classroom from 6 to 8, and I taught the ones who didn't get it right. I made sure they got it right before they left it. That's what I do. And I'd like to think that I've been blessed for doing that. For 121 drivers. I got called Uncle Tom by some of our drivers. African American drivers. Called me Uncle Tom. I don't know if you guys heard that word, but it was a word they used back in those days. And you might see that in some of your readings that you might come across. You'll see that word. But that was supposed to be a person that catered to white people and yes sir and all of this type stuff back in those days. Okay? So that's what they told me. Yeah, they just sent you here to do this. And I was told that by one of my own people, African American, but it didn't bother me. I just explained the struggle that I had and why I was there. But that's one way that we got the job done. So everything worked out well. So you're sitting in this classroom as a privilege. Stuff that we fought for. And the rise from slavery, I don't know if you ever read that. So African Americans, we've been calling all the names. I won't go into that, about 4 or 5. But it was the greatest feat in the history of mankind, the rise from slavery to where we are today. That has never happened in any country, any race of people, the rise from slavery, of what we left with. And when we were let go, when they signed the Emancipation Proclamation, they just let us go with nothing. I mean, not even $1 after all those years of working. So a lot of them, to keep them starving, had to turn around and go back to their masters, to the farms that they left, and keep them starving. A lot of that happened. So when you look at your history, and when your teacher, Ms. Winfro, she's going to be going over a lot of this in history. Make sure you pay close attention to that. So we come a long ways. Have we arrived completely yet? No, we're still getting there. But it's up to you guys now. My time is back on. I'm blessed to still be here. But it's up to you guys to be the best you can be. Nobody stop you but you. It's there now. We've already paved the road. Nobody, no teacher, no principal, nobody can stop you from making an A. Nobody. I have a youth group. I tell them that every Saturday. Be all you can be. It's all about knowledge now. Okay? The hurdles that we face are all gone. Okay? That's it. Any questions? I don't know if they have time for questions.
Yeah, they've got about 3 minutes. And
Okay.
some of I saw had questions written down on your cards. If
I'll be
you
glad
don't
to
have
entertain
anything written on
questions.
your card, just put it in the middle so we can use it for the next class. But anybody have a question you want to ask right now? Jamal?
Why didn't the president do anything about this?
What was the question?
So about segregation, why didn't the president do anything to stop anything? Like they've been learning that, you know, we have rights that are guaranteed.
He
in the
did a
Constitution.
lot of that. It started with Eisenhower. I don't know if you guys remember the Little Rock situation. Did you study about that? The Little Rock 9, when the Governor Arbor Ford was Little Rock, when
You
they
read
tried
the
to,
story about Elizabeth Eckford?
yeah, they tried to integrate it, and he stood in the door and told them you couldn't come in, and he used the National Guard. Well, as president, the National Guard is a state-run military organization, but they receive money and funds from the federal government. So he called in the National Guard to help stop them from going in. But Eisenhower federalized the National Guard. He took them over. He used those same guards to help them go in. So that's one of the things he did. And of course, we remember Lyndon Johnson. He signed the Bill of Rights in 1964 before he passed. So the presidents did what they could do. But it's not all the way up to the president. He has Congress he has to work with. Now there's a lot of things they can do with executive orders, but something like that, it took both houses of Congress to pass bills like that. And I'm sure you guys know the both houses, right? The Senate and the legislature. Okay, but that's what happened. Anybody else?
We've only got about a minute. Anybody else have a question you want to ask right now? If not, we'll just collect the questions and I'll give them to you so that if they
Okay.
get their question asked, we can.
Certainly do that.
Make
All right.
sure that if you have just a statement written on your card, that it actually is a question that I could type up, so that I know what you were trying to ask.
Right.
Okay, and then take your, so let's have a round of applause for Mr. Fort.
Thank you.
And then take your blank cards, put them in the middle of the table for next class, and if you have cards with questions on them, make sure that you give them to me. It is just about time for you to go. Yep, it is time right now. So put your chairs in. If you have cards and questions, I need them. I will see you actually on Wednesday.